of what he called the ridiculous and extraordinarily anti-American decision on tariffs issued yesterday by the Supreme Court. The High Court ruled on Friday the White House was unjustified in issuing sweeping tariffs under the Emergency Economic Powers Act. New York City is getting ready for a blizzard Sunday into Monday. Sanitation crews are preparing snowplows and salting ahead of the storm. Forecasters predict light snow will move through the area Sunday morning, then pick up speed in the afternoon. New Jersey will be under a state of emergency starting Sunday at noon. Conan O'Brien is opening up for the first time about the deaths of Rob and Michelle Reiner, who were killed after leaving a party at O'Brien's house. More from Jason Nathanson in Los Angeles.
It's just so awful.
The director and his wife were killed in December, allegedly by their son Nick. The night before they were found dead, the family was at Conan O'Brien's annual holiday party in Los Angeles, reportedly arguing with Nick.
To have that experience of saying goodnight to somebody and having them leave and then find out the next day that they're gone, we talk about, I think I was in shock for quite a while afterwards.
O'Brien on the New Yorker Radio Hour. He didn't say anything else about what happened that night at his house. Nick Reiner is awaiting trial for murder. I'm Jason Nathanson.
Vinegar sold on Amazon is being recalled due to a risk of deadly poisoning. Jolly's 80% vinegar was sold through Amazon between May and November. The Consumer Product Safety Commission warns the product violates precautionary labeling requirements. The CPSC notice states there is a deadly risk of poisoning if the contents are swallowed. Rob Artier, NBC News Radio.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Driving it home with Patty Vasquez.
Really, we need to start accepting that the vision that these people have, the Heritage Foundation, Musk, Alito, and Clarence Thomas, they are prepping us for a dictatorship. We need to destroy the democracy from the inside, making it dysfunctional and not functioning at all, so that they can take it over with their form of dictatorship and make this a corporate entity.
Patty Vasquez, weeknights 5 to 7 on WCPT 820.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
You are listening to Think Theory Radio. Radio.
Hello and welcome to Think Theory Radio, the show that brings you topics outside the mainstream realm of thought and ideas to make you think. And I'm your host, Damien Perdue, your architectural guide on this urban planning ride of audio delights. And of course, I'm joined by Bally C.
Yo.
Hey,
where have you been, man?
What do you mean?
I've been running replays. What's going on?
There were no replays.
No,
I was here.
No, I'm pretty sure when they heard about you and Chef Damien and your summer trip, they why would he go to the lake and go swimming? What?
You don't want to go up to northern Michigan during February and take a little cold plunge? Mm-hmm. Yes, I was out of town, traveling the universe, astral projecting myself through space and time. Otherwise known as Oaxaca City and the state of Oaxaca, visiting my brother down there for a little bit, which was lovely.
You've gone to Oaxaca a few times.
Yeah, ever since he's been down there. So
you're basically
this is my fourth time now.
Like a Oaxaca expert at these days.
I am the tour guide, yes, for my friends.
Like you were kind of telling me, I just wanted to sit around.
Yeah, exactly. That is the cool thing is being there so much. I don't have to do the tourist stuff, so... for the first part of the trip, I just hung out with my brother, and then I had a couple friends that came in. So then I became the tour guide and showed them all the delights that it has to offer. But we're not doing the show in Oaxaca. I've done that already. We've done 2 shows on that.
Just want to make sure we're live. This is new. The reason why it sounded familiar the last week's. The reason why is you called in and we didn't take your calls.
It is February 21st, 2026. I'm holding the newspaper up. I'm not a hostage. No. Or am I? But no, today's episode is the architecture of control. Or the control of architecture. And it's one of those things that I think we think about how leaders and society and governments and religion have, control over the populace and people and society, and you think the media and all these different things. But we take for granted the concept of architecture and urban planning as a method of control.
Okay.
And I kind of thought of this idea a while back. I went to an exhibit at the Chicago Cultural Center that was on it. I actually have this little book if you're watching on the YouTube channel. Don't forget Think Theory Radio on YouTube and Facebook Live. It's called Architecture and Land in and Out of the Americas. And just a quick paragraph on the back says, land precedes architecture. This is one of the basic assumptions underlying building culture today. But this assumption rests on a fictional vision of land as an available surface, a piece of which has to be secured before anything can be designed or built. This fiction plays a key role in the life of frontier nations. It is particularly essential to the history of architecture and settlement in the United States. And so the whole exhibit was about colonialism and architecture and urban planning and how a lot of interesting concepts, things kind of didn't think about, where, how we all know the story of the roads are paved with gold in America. And that's how a lot of, Europeans came out here in the beginning, sold on that kind of idea, the American dream, whatever. But in a similar way, what they were doing is they were selling the concept of free space, right? So this is how, in the early colonial days, they wanted more people to come out here. So they were kind of, they were going back and they were saying, hey, there's all this just available land. There's nothing there. Come build build your castle, build your home, But it was all kind of a lie, obviously it was a lie because there were people here.
Yeah.
It wasn't just free land, there were people here. But not only that, when they got here, it was all kind of you had the banking system, you had these land surveyors, you had this whole structure in place to sell you pieces of land that for the indigenous people that were here had no concept of that. They didn't believe in property ownership.
Yeah.
So they were bringing this concept over from Europe, but it was also parceling and plotting of land, and how that kind of centered around the banks, centered around government, because you'd get this little piece,
Okay.
What I mean? You get this little piece, you have to have your, your licensing and your, zoning and all of these different concepts, so that it was all kind of structured towards the funneling of money going towards the higher ups, right? So, reading the book and seeing the exhibit, I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. And then I also have this other book that I've been reading from Bucky Fuller. For those that don't know, R. Buckminster Fuller is the architect who designed the geodesic dome, which was, you've seen the geodesic dome is the baseball stadium, the Dodger Stadium. They used it to build it. They've the Montreal, the Expo Center, the big round dome with the triangles.
Yeah, okay.
So this was one of the when he came up, he had a million ideas for architecture, but that was the one that really stuck and made him a lot of money and kind of put his name in the history books, because the geodesic dome is you're using less material for more space and you get more function from it. It's stronger with less because of the concept of all the little triangles and stuff like that. But he also had in this book that I'm reading is called 9 Chains to the Moon, which is very heady. It's very I don't know if I'm going to get through it because it's great. But the way he's such an intellectual that he's writing light years beyond my brain can comprehend, But some of the concepts are really cool. His one part of it was he was talking about how we were sold these ideas of housing here in America, in the United States, and how everything is built. It's so monetary, right? It's so just to make money and to put us in these little boxes. And his whole thing is, you ever look at a building, why is it designed from the outside in?
Okay.
Right? His whole idea was, why wouldn't you design it from the inside out? If people are going to be living inside.
But what do you mean by that?
So if you look, a lot of architecture is built, they want the outside of the building to have this beauty to it and this design. he believes, this is Buckminster Fuller saying this is like an ego of the architect, right? You want this whole, you want this cool looking building, this magnificent design, and then you try to fit in the rooms and the hallways and the stairways inside after.
Okay.
Right.
And you're saying be a little bit more like Frank Lloyd Wright about it and just make the home, make
the inside first, make it, because that's where you live, right? You'd want it to be more accessible, a better living space. So that was a lot of what his idea was. And I thought, well, that's another way that it's kind of like behavioral control, right?
Yeah.
So, putting those two together, I thought, well, if you think about, and this is kind of, what we've talked about on the show before, too, in a different way, is going back throughout time, from early civilization on. So, the whole thing's like from Mesopotamia to Manhattan, these kind of different urban centers. So if you go back to like Uruk or Çatalhöyük in Turkey or Armenia, like the first two big ancient cities, and the way they were designed, and you go back to, Babylon, ancient Egypt, they all had a kind of a method of controlling the populace. Now, the control wasn't necessarily always a bad thing. Some of the control that was built in was for the environment. A lot of these original cities were built along rivers and basins, so you had to have a certain design for the, creating aqueducts and creating the irrigation systems, different things like that. But you also had, defense systems. You want to build a wall. You want to build these streets that are, harder for, let's say, like invading forces to figure out when they get in. Mm-hmm. That's why a lot of these old medieval cities have these weird windy streets and kind of look like gangways and stuff. And that was because if you didn't live there, you wouldn't know, where to navigate. Right.
It's kind of like Lower Wacker. That's why they that's why they designed that.
It was very strategic. No. So
if anybody invades us and they get stuck in Lower Wacker, we got them.
That's what we'll do. We'll retreat down there.
We'll retreat down there.
Well, because then they come in, they won't be able to find us.
We're going to be like Switzerland, where like you could put like 2/3 of the country inside the mountains and like that's their defense. Yeah.
There are those tunnels too underneath downtown.
Oh yeah, in the Lower Wacker. Yeah.
No, but it's very similar, in a way, the style of building here in the United States and, the way they built back then. But it's just different concepts. I mean, I thought about it even when COVID hit and, the George Floyd protests and everything were going on. And the mayor at the time lifted all the bridges. And I was down there. I was like, wow, this reminds me of...
Escape from New York or something?
No. I was thinking more that too, but I was thinking more of like medieval castles. Raise the drawbridge,
lower the drawbridge,
protect the king.
And it's like pouring hot tar on the protesters off the building. Yeah, sorry.
No. I mean, think about that. It's like that's where the money is. If you look at the Loop downtown. I mean, I remember I had a friend from California, and I was taking him down Lakeshore Drive, and he remarked, "Why are all the skyscrapers? Why are the tall high-rises built on the lake? Why do you have a road in between buildings and your lakefront?" Mm-hmm. Like to him, he thought it was messed up.
Because he thought the buildings should go all the way to the lake? Or...
No, because he thought they should be away from the lake because you're destroying the view from other people.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because you think, well, here's the people with money that want the view.
Yeah.
And then the proletariat that live in the background can't see it.
Depending on where you live, but
For sure.
Yeah. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like really high skyscrapers right there, and it's like you couldn't build that a few blocks away.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, Lakeshore Drive, how it started. It was because McCormick he told the city to build him a road from his mansion on North Lakeshore Drive now to where the McCormick Center is.
Okay.
Which was his factories or whatever.
And it had the big S in it and went down. And
Because he got sick of taking like the side roads and And he's like, look,
I can see the thing, and I got to drive all the way over there to drive all the way back. Yeah.
And they did.
Yeah.
Because he invested so much money in the city.
The guy should have invested in a boat.
Well, that's why we got Lakeshore Drive, But if you go back,
I've built all over Daniel Burnham's nice parks.
That's another. Yeah, so we're lucky that we had Daniel Burnham, because he actually had the idea of like park space and that kind of psychological necessity for people in society that you need a certain amount of like literal like foot space
per
person, And that's, looking up at different things for the show, that is kind of part of behavioral science and psychology that's going into a lot of more modern urban planning. I mean, you think of going back. So let's say like ancient Egypt, okay? And the pharaohs would build these massive temples and tombs to highlight their divine birth, their association with the gods, and they would build, structures like the temples and mortuary tombs to celebrate the rulers' achievements and military victories. A lot of the hieroglyphics that would be around would depict them, in these kind of positions of power, conquering armies, so that, the people would see this and say, hey, look, this guy he's a divine entity. He's related to the gods. They would build these structures around. I mean, they mimicked the star systems.
Well, the future generations, that's the only way they're getting their history is probably from that. So it's like, oh, that pharaoh must have been amazing because this giant monument to him says so.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you think like how old, how long, the Egyptian society was like 3,000 years. So if you existed 1,000, 2,000 years after the first dynasty, you're only looking at what they built and saying, wow, this person must have been amazing. Not only that, but the way they designed the cities around it. And these are some of the first influences, too. This was passed down around the world. But
luckily, no one today, thinks that way, though.
Yeah.
I'm just going to buy this or build this, and the future is going to think that I'm so great for it.
Yeah, no one would put their name on things and build arches out of nowhere.
Falsely have things named after them.
Yeah, no one would ever think to do that anymore.
Anyway.
But it's interesting, though, you bring that up, because think about this, 10,000 years later, and people,
I think the idea
are still doing the same thing.
Everybody with a little bit of an ego would, think I want to leave something behind, and those with the bigger egos would, find ways to do that.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And in which it's one thing if you're a pharaoh or a leader and you did do something, but it just seems like to me that it's like, oh yeah, this thing's going to be grand because it's me. Yeah. It's going to be my little burial, and it's going to be this monument to how awesome I am.
Well, and it was also a way to control people in terms of, hey, I'm related to the gods.
Yeah.
I am the intermediary between, me and Ra or whatever.
Yeah.
And, and they would reenact a lot of celestial movements with their kind of processions and their big parades to kind of give that impact of what they were. But not only that, it would tie into the economy and the workforce of the, building these pyramids took so much manpower, and beer production because they got to pay them in beer, right? So that was a big part of it. But, this is all all tied together, the economy, the workforce, method of control, religion. And then you think of Rome, right?
Yeah.
Very similar in how the Romans did things. They were, kind of the first ones. Now, they took a lot of the same things the Egyptian was doing, the emperor, these kind of glorious, huge temples and staircases. And, this is why these monuments and these big buildings were built, because it gives the impression of, wow, this ruler is really great. This emperor, this Caesar is really amazing and must be related to the gods. But not only that, but they were the ones to build the Colosseums. And even the Colosseums had these different social structures, right? So you had 76 numbered entrances, which was to ensure that seating was segregated by rank. And then you had senators that were closest to the action. You had followed by the elites, people with money, then women, and then the poor in the highest, most distant tiers. And think about that. This is ancient Rome.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing now.
Well, yeah.
Poor people get the high seats,
Right?
The elites get the luxury boxes. Right? The celebrities, the politicians are down at the court side.
Doesn't that make sense? I mean, isn't that...
Well, it makes sense when you think of like, the way our society is structured based upon money and wealth and social status.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting that it's still
I don't know how many civilizations were running charities here.
Well, I mean, I think there were some that were more, was egalitarian or whatever.
Yeah.
The Indus Valley civilization seems to have been a little bit more communal. Even looking at some societies in the Mayan civilization, you had different ones. You had like Palenque was more based on the king. It was smaller, centralized power with the big pyramid and everything. But then other ones were a little bit more spread out. They seemed to be more of a kind of like a House of Representatives type style run thing. I mean, the indigenous people of this country, Native Americans, were, that's where our House of Representatives come from. So that was a little bit more communal based.
Okay.
Cahokia downstate Illinois was not based upon, this kind of hierarchy and, and property ownership. It was a little bit more spread out, more equity. So there are examples of that.
Okay.
And like I said, control doesn't always necessarily.
I think the idea of
bad.
the elites and like the planners, the people that have the wealth, they're always going to come first in any sort of social situation.
Yeah, I mean we talked about that in the money and the power.
Yeah, always.
It's true.
On the post game show, we.
But they would also use that like it's funny because you brought up people nowadays who would ever build things to themselves. But that was like part of the, in Roman Emperor, the propaganda, the power projection was to build these like triumphal arcs, and they would do these like.
It's a way to be remembered. I mean,
Not only remembered, but looked at with power in their own time.
Mm-hmm.
Too,
yeah.
Didn't
get done another time. Got done during that time. Yep.
Yeah, and there was like they would use urbanization too as control because the Romanization of provinces involved constructing like standardized, orderly cities with forums, basilicas, and baths to replace the local traditions, like getting rid of the pagan ways that they were living before the Romans took over, right? So like, no, this is our style of living. You're gonna, now you're a Roman, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of different examples of that. Throughout time, but I was thinking interesting is, and we'll get to in a little bit, is where we're heading towards like smart cities, right? And how like smart cities with more technology, digitally driven information is guiding that kind of architecture and urban planning, and also in weird ways, the kind of control. Because this is the society we are in, I guess I want to say moving into, because we're already in it. So that's one thing. But then also I want to get into what is hostile architecture. And we will do that after a quick break right here on WCPT 820 Think Theory Radio.
Hey, looking for a winning team on a winning station? You found it right here on WCPT 820 AM. Join the marvelous one, Dan Marver, the palacious one, Paul Shivari, Sports on the Couches, Mike Mercado, and yours truly, Devin Tingle, every Sunday at 9 p.m. for the Sports Cubicle, where the inmates run the asylum, and the boss, well, they yell at us on Monday morning because we're working overtime. Looking for your late night dose of sports talk radio? We're here. Join us on the Sports Cubicle, Sunday nights at 9 p.m. This is WCPT telling you how you can shop blue. While Donald Trump is making a mess out of this country, let's take a look at some vacuum cleaners that support the Democratic Party. iRobot. Now, iRobot is a company that makes Roombas. Everyone knows what a Roomba is, right? Little electronic vacuums that do it themselves, pretty dang cool. Well, 96% of iRobot's donations went to Democrats in 2024. Samsung. Now, yes, Samsung did donate $374,000 to the Democratic Party in 2024. But that was only 61% of their donations. And there's a handful of vacuum cleaner companies that aren't in the U.S. and therefore don't donate to politics at all. Those companies are Dyson, they're out of the U.K., Shark Ninja, also out of the U.K., Hoover, Dirt Devil, and Roborock, all three of those are out of China. The Republicans always make the mess, and it's always the Democrats who have to clean it up, right? Maybe Donald Trump should step aside and let Roomba and Samsung take over. This has been WCPT telling you how you can shop blue.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Welcome back to Think Theory Radio. This is Damien, and today we're talking about the architecture of control. How do the people in power use architecture and urban planning to control our minds? Well, not just that, but, some good purposes. Help maintain the environment. I mean, think about the Chicago River, reversing the river, so we don't have the pollution. Give it to the people in St. Louis. But also just all the different concepts, of building art, buildings itself. There's a good quote from Winston Churchill, 1943, while considering the repair of the bomb-ravaged House of Commons, said, "We shape our buildings, and afterwards our buildings shape us, man." It's a very hippie kind of statement from Winston Churchill. Buildings shape us, man.
It just sounds like something a politician would say, though.
Yeah.
The buildings shape us.
We shape the buildings, and buildings shape us.
Yeah, no, he said that at a ribbon cutting, right? Is that when he said it?
Not a ribbon cutting, but he was he was considering the war-torn, after the bomb ravage stuff. And
how we should rebuild England, yeah.
Yeah. So, also, I briefly mentioned how, my origin story, this idea for the show was the concept of architecture and land in and out of the Americas, and how plotting of land and getting money to the banks and everything is, and how this plotting land functions as control. When you think of different ways that is enacted, you have spatial discipline and exclusion. So you have plotting converts vast landscapes into rigid, grid-like, legally defined parcels or lots, establishing clear boundaries that define ownership. This allows owners to legally exclude others, transforming land from a shared resource into a commodity. Then you have administrative and fiscal control, where governments use surveyed plots for the cadastral recording of land, which is essential for taxation. A registered plot provides a legal basis for state surveillance of land value, ownership changes, and resource exploitation. You have the regulatory power, like zoning and planning, where plot plans are used to enforce municipal, state, or colonial regulations, such as setback requirements, land use restrictions, and building codes. You have colonial political assertion. So historically and currently, mapping and plotting are used to assert sovereignty over new territories or indigenous lands. By drawing maps and creating plots, states fix boundaries to control resources and manage populations. Standardization of behavior. We have the rigid structure of a plotted subdivision or subdivision plan enforces specific orderly behavior and land use patterns, transforming social behavior to match the spatial arrangement. And there's also hidden ways that architecture affects how you feel. And there is tons of studies, and now there's even behavioral sciences and psychologists that are being employed by urban planners and architectural firms to design buildings and new cities in ways that hopefully can be psychologically beneficial, because there's proof in a lot of different examples over time of how it's the opposite has been true, where it's very detrimental to your psychology. But we know, for example, that buildings and cities can affect our mood and well-being, and that specialized cells in the hippocampal region of our brains are attuned to the geometry and arrangement of spaces we inhabit. So, urban architects often paid, very little attention to the potential of cognitive effects of their creation on a city's inhabitants. And the imperative to design something unique and individual tends to override considerations of how it might shape the behaviors of those who will live with it. But hopefully, this is changing with these new different concepts. And there was a conference called the Conscious Cities Conference in London, which considered how cognitive scientists might make their discoveries more accessible to architects. The conference brought together architects, designers, engineers, neuroscientists, and psychologists. And they're increasingly crossing paths at academic level. but they rarely do in practice. So hopefully this is going to bring people together in a different way to kind of design these newer cities. And I was saying that you have like these kind of horror stories from the past, like the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex in the 1950s in St. Louis, where you had 33 featureless apartment blocks designed by Minoru Yamasaki, who was also responsible for the World Trade Center. Now, quickly, they became notorious for their crime, squalor, and social dysfunction. Critics argued that the wide open spaces between the blocks of modernist high-rises discouraged a sense of community, particularly as crime rates started to rise. They were eventually demolished in 1972. And that was not an outlier. The lack of behavioral insight behind the modernist housing projects of that era, with their sense of isolation from the wider community and ill-conceived public spaces, made many of them feel designed for you not to succeed. And you could see that if anybody grew up in Chicago in the, 60s on to 70s, 80s. I know I was around 80s and 90s when you used to have the huge project areas like Robert Taylor Homes, Stateway Gardens. You had the Lathrop Homes and these huge housing projects that looked like something out of like Soviet Russia, right? There's big blocks, apartment blocks. I think at one point in time, the Robert Taylor Homes and Stateway Gardens was the longest stretch of housing projects in the country. And it went from, I believe, 26th Street to about 50-something. So it was about 30 blocks of huge high-rise, just, very bland block-type buildings. And you're not going to, and it makes sense whether people believe that it was designed for you not to succeed, right? Because they're not inspiring. And you live in these kind of just boxy type homes. And obviously now it's one thing if they're well maintained, but obviously if you put in people that at the time when you have so much racism and segregation, including within the government itself, they were not going to look after these places, so they were left in disrepair. And it's the same way that a lot of places were designed in cities. Chicago itself, there was built in a lot of ways to segregate people. There's like building low. You ever wonder how there's like some bridges are really low? Like the railroad bridges in certain neighborhoods.
Okay.
That was designed in a way so that buses couldn't get through. So that like it cut off people in black neighborhoods from the lake and from downtown and stuff like that. The same reason it's believed that the Dan Ryan was built straight through the old Italian neighborhood that used to be at UIC because it would like separate because that used to be like a really poor neighborhood and kind of separate it from the money. Mm-hmm. This is other ways that.
Yeah, the use of highways to separate different neighborhoods is like kind of a tactic used a lot of places.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is something that went on for years. I don't know if it's still used, I would hope not today, but, who knows what's going on. But yeah, there's so many different ways that the kind of xenophobia, racism was used in urban planning in the past. And we're still feeling the effects of that. Growing up, I mean, if you grew up in Chicago, you've always heard that Chicago is the most segregated city in the country. Right. And it's not just because of the different neighborhoods, with a large majority of a certain ethnicity or whatever. It's because of the way it was designed, the way that it was structured. Then you push people out. I mean, it was constantly like, as gentrification started happening, the gentrification doesn't start on the outskirts and move in. It starts in the inside and moves out because they want that property downtown. That just quickly made me think of like Streeterville. And Captain Streeter, who was like this, just kind of a crazy hobo captain dude that like crashed his boat on the lake and, making moonshine and just, but then the rich people that were around there, wanted that land. Yeah. So they forced the city or made the city force him out. But then they call it Streeterville, which I think is pretty ironic.
Yeah.
So there's all these different ways that it's used. You think about, and then, we're just talking about, okay, there's urban, but we have like suburban, right? And how were the suburbs created?
Okay. I guess it depends on the suburb, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day. So because I take the train and I'm leaving the city, and the closer suburbs just seem like little cities. Like, especially like parts of the city just seem like little villages.
Yeah.
On the outskirts that they've annexed. But then, like, there's a lot of forest preserve on, by the Des Plaines River, so there's a little bit of a gap, but then there's like the next wave of suburbs, and some of them seem a little less urban, or they have downtown urban centers and have sprawled out from there.
Right.
And then you go a little bit further out and it's the same thing, but like there might be a little bit more forest preserve, there might be just straight city, and then it gets to like the far suburbs and it's all spread out and forest and and then it depends on what your definition of the edge of the suburbs is. But
well, I think just as a concept, the suburbs, so if you go back to the kind of 40s and 50s when suburban sprawl really started to take off, and a lot of this, it was another kind of money scheme in a lot of ways, right? This was bankers and realtors that decided, hey, let's, we can build these homes for cheap outside of the city. We'll get we'll convince the city, we'll lobby the government to build these highways, and then we'll go in and, I don't know if you're like blockbusters. So they used to go into the urban neighborhoods and convince white people to move out. Oh, the black people are moving in. You got to sell your home, and now you could buy this beautiful home in the suburb. That's how they got white flight to go.
Yeah.
There's a lot of psychological manipulation and convince people that the suburbs are going to be so grand. You move out here, but what it was just a bunch of cookie cutter homes, not really built well. And it goes back to like the Buckminster Fuller thing of just building from the outside in, and every place looks the same. And then the idea that you're moving out to this place you're going to escape crime, or you're going to escape some kind of, problem child or whatever, There was I wish I could remember the movie. I think it was from the 80s. And it was basically about that. I don't think it was called Suburbs, but it was a young Matt Dillon, I believe, was in it.
Rumblefish?
No, that was a good movie too, though. No, it basically, the plot was there was this, suburban sprawl, and the town, basically all these kids were bored. They had nothing to do, so they were starting to do, stupid, dumb stuff like, burning fires or whatever.
Yeah, okay, this sounds familiar, but okay.
And then they but of course, instead of like connecting with their kids, it's like all the parents are getting together and trying to figure out what to do with these troubled kids, and they were all in the school auditorium together, and then the crazy kids, they went and they locked them all in together.
Yeah, yeah. This sounds familiar.
Yeah, but the core concept of that movie was like you can't escape your problems by moving out to these suburban areas. But that's how like the suburbs spread. This was like it's another way to kind of create control, create these systems, create these little small towns. I do admire the way Chicago was designed for every neighborhood to be a kind of small town. So you have one big city, but each neighborhood at a certain point in time, I mean, I don't think you have it as much now because it's a little more homogenous, but
it's more interconnected now, I think, then too, or now than it was then. Like back then it was like the slower trains that might carry, but now you have buses, cars, everything.
Yeah, but each neighborhood was designed to have kind of its own little mini downtown, and you'd have the the retail shops, and you had businesses, and you had factories, and
you've seen that kind of fade a little bit, because there's like certain like corners where you see pictures from back in the day, and it was just hustle bustle, huge little like what part of the city is that? And then you see it nowadays, and it's like like an apartment building and maybe a store. You know?
And I mean, there's a lot of different reasons for that. That would be like a whole other show about Reaganomics and deregulation. And but yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think that was cool. But then, and I wanted to get to this, and it kind of ties into like Chicago and urban living. But as I was researching some topics for the show and ideas, I came across the concept of hostile architecture.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Which is basically like, or it's also called the defensive design. Right. It's the urban design strategy that uses elements of the built environment to purposefully guide behavior and exclude the public from public space access.
Mm-hmm.
So hostile architecture, is basically covertly and sometimes overtly keeps people away, which is kind of stupid, right? Like, you build these public spaces, then you do something else to create it so that people don't go there. Hostile architecture stems from urban planning designs that aim to fight perceived social disorder and often targets people who use to rely on the public space more than others, such as the youth, poor people, unhoused. Like if you see like the benches and they want to put spikes and stuff, or like a bar in the middle of the bench so you can't sleep there. Or if you see the kind of slanted window sills so you can't sit on them.
Yep.
A lot of different structures like that.
Oh, yeah. Someone that takes the train a lot. I see that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah.
You also see it with the birds, too. They have like little spiky spots where like the birds can't land.
Mm-hmm. And, going back to kind of we were talking about like the segregation stuff, this also ties into that. And, for you M&M fans, one example is the Detroit 8 Mile Wall, which was built in 1941, was meant to segregate white neighborhoods and black neighborhoods. American urban planner Robert Moses designed a stretch of Long Island's Southern State Parkway with low stone bridges so that buses cannot pass under them, like I was talking about. And these are all different kind of ways to prevent people from engaging in public spaces. Modern forms derive from design philosophy called crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTD, which aims to prevent crime and protect property through 3 strategies: natural surveillance, natural access control, and territorial enforcement. According to experts, exclusionary design is becoming increasingly common in large cities like Stockholm. So there are different ways, but I do think that so I don't know if you've noticed in Chicago, there's like the new kind of corners they're building.
Okay.
They're like eliminating the end of the block. I don't know how to say. So you'd have a straight block.
Okay.
Originally, right?
Yeah.
And you'd have that little tow zone part at the end of the block.
Yeah.
And there would be a fire hydrant or whatever there, but you could still kind of park there.
Okay.
You could double park there.
Yeah.
But now they're building the concrete to go outward into the street.
Oh, so you
can't park there, right? Now, there's 2 things. One, as a driver, I don't like that because sometimes you got to run in a place real quick and I need a place to just double park for a second. But their idea is that if you expand the sidewalk, and I have seen examples of this, you can create a bigger public space. So what they say is, well, we want to do this to prevent, people from parking there and creating some kind of traffic jam or whatever, but also to put in, benches and sculptures and create a wider sidewalk so that people could congregate, people could meet there, people could grab their divvy bike and, or their scooter and scoot around, So the concept is, if that's the actual intention, that's kind of cool. And some of them do look like that. I mean, I know over in Lincoln Parks, like Lincoln and Wrightwood, around over there, Lincoln and Wellington, it does look like that. It has kind of a wider space. There's some sculptures, there's little benches. It does look like it's trying to encourage people to kind of congregate. The same thing if you think about bike lanes, right? We think of bike lanes as, okay, here is something to create safety for cyclists, which I'm all for, but it's also psychologically in a way to encourage people to ride bikes. Because if you create a situation where traffic is harder to get, it makes it harder to drive because you're cutting off these lanes and parking and everything. Their hope is that more people would rather ride their bike because the bike lane's free. I don't know if that's going to work. I mean, I think in a warmer city, you work. I think I do see more people riding their bikes nowadays than I do remember in the past. But I don't know.
Milwaukee Avenue has a bike lane, and I see everyone riding their bike on the sidewalk.
That's because they put these bike lanes and then they don't clean them. And then there's debris there.
Well, I mean, sure.
Yeah.
There's debris everywhere, but no, it's just people that are too chicken to go into the street.
Yeah, you can't control everything now. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into a little bit about smart cities How will technology and urban planning drive us going into the future? On Think Theory Radio right after this.
The Sports Cubicle.
Economics professor at Smith College, Massachusetts, Andrew Zimbalist.
When Chicago is approached, or Illinois is approached for new public funds to build yet another stadium, it shouldn't be, hey, this is going to be an economic boon for the city. It's not going to be. It should be, how much is it worth to us culturally to keep these teams here?
The Sports Cubicle with Mike Mercado, Devin Tingle, Dan Marver, and Paul Shivari. Sunday nights, 9 p.m. on WCPT.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Welcome back to Think Theory Radio. Today we are talking about the architecture of control. And I was looking up some, interesting information. Do you know that over half of the world's population now lives in urban environments?
I could believe it.
And it's expected by 2050 to go up to about 68%.
A lot of that could be with just cities are just going to explode.
Yeah, I mean, now you have like the mega cities.
Yeah, and like Lagos, Nigeria, they're talking about like that's going to explode in population.
Yeah, that's going to be, the mega cities coming to Africa and India and everything, like that's like the next wave. And right now, you have North Americans and Europeans have been shown to spend approximately 90% of their time indoors. I thought that was interesting. And it's a little about 2 to 4% of their time outdoors. Now, of course,
this young generation and what they want to do indoors or outdoors, I don't think it's going to get any more outdoorsy.
Yeah. Now flipping to the, real quick, like the good side of designing things, with control and not just like segregation and all the bad stuff. You have Feng Shui, right? So back in 5000 BC, there was the discipline of Feng Shui came about, the philosophical approach to architecture that aims to create physical environments that encourage well-being, and that began spreading in China. Similarly, around 1500 BC, the Indian architectural philosophy of Vastu Shastra, was developed to create a balance between humans, nature, and the built environment to promote peace, happiness, and prosperity. But, in the 20th century, we had more of a shift towards improving the utilitarian measures and space efficiency, construction costs. But there's going from the Feng Shui of China to kind of modern China, I was thinking about too, because they definitely have a very robust way in creating urban spaces that also are very good in controlling the population, right? In terms of surveillance, these kind of big gated communities, the way they have their public transportation. And they're also looking things up, I thought was an interesting concept in terms of, I don't know if you want to call it it's not colonialism, but it's, or imperialism necessarily, but the way like comparative to the U.S., right, where we went out around the world and we're going to build a military base. This is how we kind of went into different countries, right? We're going to build military bases. Well, China, what they're doing is they're using infrastructure as a way.
Okay.
Right? So they're going into different countries, Africa and Asia, different parts of Asia, and they're building infrastructure. And they're using this as a way to kind of gain, I don't want to say control, but influence over these other countries. They're working on a huge kind of land bridge that's going through China, Eastern Europe, Russia, all the way through, into, I believe, into the Middle East or the other sides, like to restructure their whole trade routes and everything. So I thought that was another way of kind of controlling a situation, controlling the economy, having the influence on other countries and people of the world instead of doing it militarily.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And you think about like China itself, which was once like a very poor developing country not that long ago that lacked all kinds of basic infrastructure. And now it's one of the most advanced in infrastructure. I mean,
we're still not the #1 country in the world, so.
Yeah. But they're the hottest. They're the hottest country.
No one's hotter than them right now, huh?
Yeah.
Some have said. Many people have said.
Now they are the world's largest investor in infrastructure, spending an average of 8.5% of their GDP on construction of road and railways, as well as power and water facilities, highways, industrial parks, all kinds of solid infrastructure. So I just thought that was an interesting, kind of comparison between where we're going, which is like lacking an investment of infrastructure, which is really going to be detrimental to this country, as opposed to what China's doing is just so much money in infrastructure, not just in their own country, but in other countries around the world. All right.
You reap what you sow.
Mm-hmm. So now we got what's coming is smart cities. Well, they're already here to a degree, but what's that going to look like, right?
Smart cities. Mm-hmm. What's a smart city?
So a smart city is designed to address issues like traffic congestion, pollution, energy consumption through technology, collecting and analyzing data, and making, quote unquote, informed decisions that improve the lives of their citizens, supposedly. That's going to be like the blending of digital and physical worlds. Smart cities aren't just about the physical infrastructure. They're also about digital transformation and the rise of technologies like AI and blockchain. This is creating these cities that are going to I can't ever say supposedly.
Supposedly.
Be more efficient, sustainable, and connected. The traffic in smart cities will be monitored in real time. They use AI algorithms, adjusting signals and routes to reduce congestion. Energy efficient buildings will be designed to conserve resources, and waste management systems use sensors to optimize collection schedules. Even public services like healthcare and education are being revolutionized by this, digital technologies, improving access and efficiency. So, it's, I hope that's where it goes. I don't know. It depends. It all depends on who's in power, right? Who's investing the money. I mean, if you look at, I had to go back to China, but if you go back to China, if you look at the cities they're building, because they do have smart cities. I mean, they do have really high-tech cities with, free public transportation. It's very easy to get around. You can utilize your phones and different things, different aspects in much easier ways than here. There's less the concept of intellectual property rights and all that. It's a little different over there than here.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more it's not, how here you can't have Android and iPhone, it's two different things, right? But there you have a little more homogeny toward, integration with technology and stuff. So I think that's where we're headed, but I don't know. I mean, and part of me is a little, when you rely so much on technology, it's a little scary, especially when you're designing, a huge mega city.
Yeah.
With 20 million people, or something. And it's so much relied on technology that can break down, or if, a solar flare hits it.
If it could still function without it, I suppose, but.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. But I mean, if everything is digital and everything's run through AI, how could it be,
I don't know.
And then not only that, but it's where is the energy consumption coming from?
There you go.
Is this going to be, the belief is that it can be more sustainable because you're going to have less it'll be more frugal. You're going to have less just kind of waste. You're not going to have the way here, I want to drive the biggest truck I can and, burn a bunch of fossil fuel and gas. I don't care. Where there would be more electric, more solar.
I gotcha.
Supposedly.
Yeah, because it's all going to be tied up in the AI.
Exactly. And then that's, how much energy is that using? So,
I'd like to think that the AI people are the ones that are like, no, you need to have a smart city. You need to use all of this. And we're going to find out the hard way why we shouldn't have been doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be done in the right way. I know that Estonia, and I've brought them up on the show before because I think it's kind of an interesting...
Because that's a country we always look to as our shining light, our beacon, our leader. Where is Estonia?
Whenever I joke around, I say, something's wrong here, I always say, this wouldn't happen in Estonia. And the reason is that there's I brought this up on a show before, but I watched this, I think it was kind of a docuseries called Connected, and one of them was about clouds. And they were talking about how Estonia is I don't know if it still is the only one, but it was the first country to be completely in the cloud and utilize technology in that kind of way. Now, it is a much smaller country, obviously, than the U.S., but their efficiency is so much higher, right? So because everything is in the cloud, all your information is in there. One, you don't need a social security number, and you don't have to worry. You get a digital ID number. You don't have to worry about people stealing it or whatever, because only you can use it. Even if you had my number, you couldn't use it. You'd have all the information that people there do their taxes in like 3 minutes because everything's already kind of done. Which I always thought was weird here. Like, we report our taxes. They already know how much taxes. Why do I have to do more work to tell you how much to take from me?
It makes more sense for the people that are like independent and run their own businesses, though.
Yeah.
Because I think you and I are just 1040 easies.
Yeah.
I mean, plug in a couple numbers, man, I could do your taxes for you. But like, if you run in your own business, it gets a little weird with Schedule C's and things like that.
I don't know. It's a scam.
Sorry. It's a scam. Sorry. I'm trying to be the practical accountant about it.
No, man, the tax preparer lobbyists pushed for them to do it. It's true.
I believe on some level they ever since the United States went digital, or at least, everybody went digital.
Yeah.
The state won't let you do it without paying to file, I think. I could be wrong about that. But there's one of them you have to pay to file. Yeah. One of them you can do it for free. But then it's like they want you to use a service where it's like, man, I used to go to the library and get the form that I needed and fill it out, pen and paper, send it off. It'd cost me the stamp.
Yeah. I use Free Tax USA. Somebody was doing it. Check that one out, because you do file federal taxes free, and then it's like $14 for state tax, or at least for Illinois. I don't know if it's for other ones.
I think that's just the filing fee. But I
exactly. Yeah. But there's not a lot. There's no bunch of hidden fees like if you go to the other ones. Like,
you got less than 2 months, people.
But so going from where we're at to the future of these smart cities, going from the ancient days when the pharaohs would project themselves as gods, to now the future where the oligarchs will be the digital gods. It'd be interesting. I mean, like I said, if there are examples of it done the right way, like, brought up Estonia, I think China in a lot of ways does it the right way. I'm a little worried here because I don't know if we have the leadership capabilities to do things the right way. And this isn't just...
Not without incentivizing the powers that be that run this country.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, not even just this administration. I mean, if you think of down the line, so many different things that have been swayed away from beneficial technology that we could have had because of lobbying and everything, and changing the way our city and country is designed because of money. Think about it. We should have a way better train system than we do, and that's all because of car companies lobbying for highways, and airline companies lobbying for more airports.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? There's so much of that's going to be a hard road to travel. Get it? See what I'm doing? All right, that's it for today. We'll be back again next week and every Saturday, 6 to 7 p.m. right here on WCPT 820 Think Theory Radio.
From the heart of Chicago, it's WCPT 820. Progressive Talk Radio, where facts matter and voices fight for change. WCPT 820.
The Sports Cubicle.
Commissioner of the American Association of Professional Baseball, Joshua Schaub.
So our players are not playing to develop to make it to the major leagues.
They play for the name on the front of their jersey. They play for each other, and they play to win. So the style of baseball is completely different. They're literally trying to get guys out. They're literally trying to move runners over. They're trying to win the game. So I just want to note that difference as well.
The Sports Cubicle, Sunday nights, 9 p.m. on WCPT.
Listen to the Thom Hartmann radio program every weekday from 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, where facts matter.